Hello, Chelsea fans, and welcome back to another episode of the London is Blue podcast, the annual Change the Manager special with Matt Law. We were just having a little bit of a laugh beforehand, Matt, that we're back again after, I was just kind of in preparation for this pod, doing a little bit of thinking back to this time last year when Chelsea announced the hire of Mauricio Pochettino, and then, not even one calendar year later, we're back.
No, although it was a long spell in comparison to the last one, and to the one before that. So, hey, this is life with Chelsea, isn't it? I'm used to it. I've come to expect it, and we have to laugh. You have to keep a sense of humor in these things, otherwise you could drive yourself mad.
Yeah, drive yourself mad indeed. Of course, you guys know what we're covering in this one. It's all about Chelsea's decision or mutual decision to part ways from Mauricio Pochettino and what comes next. Of course, you guys know the calls to action here. Thanks to the amazing community, 5-star reviews really help us get discovered. It's a podcast discovery is a really shitty thing out there. So if you can do a 5-star review, that really does help get in front of new people. Please subscribe on YouTube. More to come on our plans for YouTube, but you're going to want to be subscribed there. And then, of course, if you are interested in joining the discussion on Discord, it's a small monthly fee to do that, to join the most badass paid community on the planet. And Sam just dropped a banger of a newsletter for the London is Blue Dispatch. Of course, links are all throughout our socials, but that is one that you'll definitely want to be subscribed for, especially as we go throughout the summer. So, of course, we have a lot of episodes coming up. We're going to have a ton of content over the next 2 weeks. A few end of season specials, which are currently getting amended as we speak. Keep Sell Loan, which will be very fun. We're looking forward to that one, as always. Player targets, manager targets, and much, much more. But Matt, as I said, we're back again. It's because the season ended on a little bit of a high. I kind of went back and was thinking about how all-encompassing and downright exhausting this season was for Chelsea Football Club. And, of course, Chelsea finished 6th. We do not know yet if that will be good enough for Europa League, obviously the FA Cup final to come. But it was a long old season, wasn't it?
Yeah, it felt like 2 seasons in one, actually. The first half of the season felt like a season in its own right. And then the way the season sort of pivoted and became more positive in the second half of the season, that also felt like a season in its own right. So to me, it felt like 2 seasons. It really did feel like 2 seasons. And I was hoping to enjoy a break. I'm not going anywhere, but I'm due to have some annual leave next week, which is well timed.
Yeah. Good thing there's nothing happening in Chelsea Football Club
Exactly.
during that moment. Look, we'll just start off with the club statement. Obviously, if you are any sort of tuned in, you already know what the statement says, but just for posterity's sake, I'll read it anyway. Chelsea FC can confirm that the club and Mauricio Pochettino have mutually agreed to part ways. Sporting directors Lawrence Stewart and Paul Stanley said, on behalf of everyone at Chelsea, we would like to express our gratitude to Mauricio for his service this season. He will be welcome back at Stamford Bridge at any time, and we wish him all the very best in his future coaching career. Poch said thank you to Chelsea ownership and sporting directors for the opportunity to be a part of this football club's history. The club is now well positioned to keep moving forward in the Premier League and Europe in the years to come. Of course, Poch's whole staff will have left with him. That's pretty standard protocol for these things. And my favorite part of the statement, Matt, Chelsea will be making no further comment until such time as the new head coach is appointed. Dear God, please don't ask us any questions about this one. That's what that said at the end. I think the only question here, is just like, we were kind of talking on WhatsApp. It seemed as if the last couple of weeks of the season, the press conferences, all that sort of stuff, that it was trending in this direction.
Yeah.
Obviously, it seems like there's no bad blood here like there has been with some others.
No.
You
There
know,
really isn't. There really
just
isn't. I'm told, I've obviously done some digging since. I'm told, the meetings started, this famous end of season review, it started at about midday on Monday. On Monday, I'm told it was mainly led by Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart. I think it went on for hours, 3, 4, 5 hours with those guys. I don't think Badad Agbali had too much input from what I understand into that meeting. I'm sure he spoke to Pochettino during that day, and then it was pretty much mutually agreed that day, and then everyone decided to sleep on it, make sure they weren't coming to any hasty decisions, and reconvene, and everyone sort of confirmed they felt the same way. I'm told there were jokes cracked. I'm told that some of the talks were held going for a walk, not even just sitting in a room. Had a walk around Cobham talking, not just locked in a cold room. Um, you can tell from the statement as well, to be fair. I mean, when you hear this kind of things, you can be very cynical, and I'm probably one of the most cynical people going. It's part of my job. And think, yeah, right, bullshit mutual, bullshit. Was all okay. But I mean, you don't release two sets of quotes like that if it isn't a proper mutual, and if everybody isn't fairly relaxed about the way it's gone. I get the impression that the club have got kind of what they felt is the best for them. And I think Pochettino probably feels it's the best for him as well. And that I'm told that, shaking hands and all that business. So it's been coming for a while, though. I mean, I've got to say, looking back, and I wrote this in the piece I wrote on Tuesday, looking back as far as the point at which Pochettino was very dismissive of a set-piece coach, and then finding out 3 weeks later that Chelsea weren't only appointing a set-piece coach, they were setting up a whole new set-piece department. That I remember thinking at that moment, this will be the point I look back to and think these two parties were heading in very separate directions. And I remember thinking at the time, I was in my car, I had to pull over in my car to write the story because someone had called me while I was in my car. So I'd pulled over somewhere safe, written it. And I remember thinking in my car, I'm going to think about this moment because it's going to be the moment it became clear that two worlds colliding here.
yeah, it's I think on the cynicism part, you look at this and it's the old um she didn't dump me. We came to an agreement that we were just gonna part
But
ways, and
all I would say on that is sometimes you get told about mutual agreements, but you don't. If you look back at quotes of managers leaving football clubs, it's very rare you get both parties give such a glowing quote. Um, and like that can obviously be managed, but you still need people to be willing for that to be their last words towards one another and stuff. And it genuinely is quite rare to read from the club they're welcome back at any time, and rare for the manager to be quite so glowing about every confidence this club's going to have success at home and in Europe. So, and from what I hear, I genuinely do believe it was quite a genial conversation. Poch is a really nice guy. They know he's a really nice guy. I don't actually see a world in which this was two parties arguing and shouting at each other. I really don't. And as I say, I heard they even went for a walk while they did it and stuff. So, yeah, here we are again.
here we are again. All right. Well, we're going to take one quick early ad break so we can dive into the meat of this stuff, talk through the decision making process, criteria for success, all of the important details coming up next. Thank you to the sponsors for financially supporting the show, and we'll be right back. All right, Matt, we kind of went through some of the timeline stuff, so I'm not going to beat this with a dead horse. Obviously, one thing that I did find interesting, and I know we've talked about this multiple times, but I do think it's just worth calling out, right? You've said throughout the season that Badad Bali is now largely the one calling the shots within the club structure. He's much more in pole position as it pertains to decision making and the structure that's being set up, all that sort of stuff. Did find it interesting that Todd Bowley had dinner with Poch on Friday before the end of the season. On Sunday, all reports were that that was a very good environment. That it wasn't anything that would have really teed up. I think what was to come. you have to ask. I have to ask this question of you.
Yeah,
Are
yeah, go
are
for it.
they are
I
they
might not be able.
going? Are they
Go
are
on.
they are they going in different directions? They have different visions for what this thing is because it
Well,
seems
look,
so odd to me that they would do two different sorts of experiences like this or not be in the same room together.
look. I don't quite know why, but I'm told that Todd couldn't be in the country on Monday or Sunday. I don't think he was in the country on Sunday either. I'm not fully sure on that one. I know he wasn't at the Bournemouth game. He couldn't be in the country on Monday. He had dinner with Pochettino on the Friday, and I think he visited Cobham on the Saturday as well, um, to just again see Pochettino, speak to a few people. I I've got to be honest. Some stuff I just don't know, and this one I don't know. I was surprised when Poch said it in his press conference because I hadn't had any wind of it. No journalist had. It caught me off guard. Um, the easy reaction would have been to think, "Oh, Poch is staying then," but I immediately thought, I just don't feel that. I just don't feel that it necessarily is significant in terms of his future. I think I personally think that it's just more indicative of the fact that the two guys had a good relationship. Whether they thought professionally it was working brilliantly or not, they actually still had a good relationship. And I genuinely don't know, but I know that Todd couldn't be in the country on Monday. I know he was involved in the end of season review in terms of being involved remotely, whether that through be telephone or video messaging. I know he was involved in that. And at the end of the day, it is fact, and this is absolute fact, and it has to happen, that no decision can be made without Todd Bowley and the other co-controlling owners from the Clear Lake side, Badad Bali and Jose Feliciano, signing the piece of paper. They all have to sign. Otherwise, it can't go through. So Todd must have signed the piece of paper. As I say, I know he was involved in discussions remotely on Monday. So I think it must have been something they all settled on and agreed on. Yeah, it is odd. I'll fully agree it's odd, and I don't quite know what that dinner was all about. But retrospectively, it just looks like a dinner between two guys who got on well, and maybe Todd knew which way the wind was blowing, and that was his last chance to sort of. He obviously didn't say goodbye unless everyone kept it a massive secret, but just have some moments with him and share some time with him.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the rest of the timeline kind of writes itself. Chelsea win their fifth game of the in a row on Sunday to close out the season, finish in sixth, and then, of course, we know what happens from there. I think the biggest question I had coming out of the news on Tuesday, Matt, is that we're now heading in a different direction. It appears that at some point through this season, that the criteria for success or the criteria that the club are looking for a new manager to meet potentially changed, right? We're seeing briefs that young, progressive, attacking style with a really strong defensive base made me chuckle personally, as if that's not football. Yeah, I think that was really cute. But I think the criteria for how Poch was judged is really interesting. I think again, I think you and I have maybe a little bit of different take on Poch. Wasn't his biggest fan personally, but also saw that the team had started to, certainly over the last half of the season,
Yeah,
improve results dramatically, obviously finishing 6 places higher and 19 odd points better than last season's results is not nothing in a world where, I think the structure is going to be difficult to succeed in for a little bit until all the
yeah,
players get to a certain maturity level. I think we got a question along similar vein from Satchit saying, uh, where did it all go wrong? Why did Potch suddenly not want to work on this model? Wasn't it communicated to him how things were going to be run at the time he was hired? And the reverse question of that, Matt, here's a bunch of questions in a row for you. Wouldn't the sporting directors or sporting structure know who Potch was when they interviewed him for the role that he was going to be who he is?
right. How to best answer this? So,
Yeah, it's I threw you a big one there, so take your time.
yes. So, my reading of the situation is that, and sorry, come back to me if I need to answer things more specifically, but I'll give you my reading of the situation, which I think answers some of it. Is that pretty much Pochettino had a 2-year contract with the option to extend by a third. Now, it seems that Chelsea decided that if they didn't finish the season at a point where they thought it worth extending his contract and taking up that option, that they thought it was worth looking in a different direction. It seems that they didn't actually want to go into the final year of his contract. They didn't want, for several different reasons. I mean, this is a small reason, but the Club World Cup starts in mid-June next summer, and his contract would have ended to the end of June, which causes a slightly messy situation. They didn't want to risk what they felt may have caused a situation where they might be under pressure to sack him at some point next season, and they didn't want the uncertainty of last year's contract. So it feels like actually when they appointed him, they'd already made a decision whereby they'd thought we're going to give this a year, and at the end of the year, if we feel that we've seen enough to extend, we'll extend, and if we don't want to extend, that's probably the point where we start talking about do we carry on. Pochettino, I think, was probably the same in that he wasn't going to quit Chelsea, just like they weren't going to actually sack Pochettino. You know, it has got a bit lost in this that they did not actually sack him, and they weren't going to sack him. If he hadn't have agreed to walk, I don't think they'd have sacked him. I think we'd have been stuck in a real horrible, slightly marriage of convenience. But he was also never going to quit. But again, from his perspective, once the club were not showing a commitment to him by saying, we want to take up this option and we do actually want to see you as a longer term manager, that immediately, again, causes problems for him, because in reality, if you have a manager where you're going to go into the last year of his contract with no real desire or thought from either side to extend it, well, you're not going to sign players that he wants, because what's the point? You're not really going to do anything within the club in the direction of that manager, because you're assuming that you're going to make a change. And I think that's where the sort of decision came to. In terms of at what point they found that maybe Pochettino wasn't the manager that they maybe thought. That's an interesting question, because the 3 men on their shortlist that ended up on their shortlist before they appointed Pochettino was Pochettino, obviously, Arne Slot and Vincent Kompany. Now, Arne Slot and Vincent Kompany, now currently, that neither of them are going to join. One's joined Liverpool and one's about to join Bayern Munich. But if you were to fast forward to now, Vincent Kompany and Arne Slot probably actually fit what we're hearing the brief is more than Pochettino now. So it also feels that maybe they moved away slightly last summer from their long-term brief to bring in some experience in Pochettino to steady the ship. I'm guessing slightly here, because no one really will ever tell you this kind of stuff. I'm reading between the lines. But yeah, that's my reading. Sorry if I haven't answered specifically. If there's a specific question in there, ask me, because it's a very broad one and quite a difficult one to give one answer to.
No, it's just, I think again, we're recording this on Thursday. The thing happened Tuesday, so we've had a couple of days to kind of react and settle into the news. But to me, it feels one, because the club have done a very poor job of communicating the vision that they have. This mystical vision lives somewhere only a certain number of people can see, and that there was some progress being made towards getting results back into a place where they were palatable for sure.
I get that. So I agree on the progress. So yeah, this isn't my opinion on the progress, because I actually agree with the fact that progress was being made. And, if it were me, I would be judging on that progress. But sure, I'm not a sporting director. I'm not an owner. I'm not privy to all the facts. But what seems to have been judged is the season overall. And I think the thought that going to the final year of a contract, they obviously weren't confident that the progress that has been made over the last months wasn't going to at some point revert back to some of the chaos we had seen. And at that point, what do you do? Do you sack him or do you carry on for the rest of the season? You know, I think they must have thought that there was the opportunity or the chance under Pochettino that Chelsea were going to go back to a situation where they were going to lose to a Wolves at home, draw to a Burnley at home, draw to a Sheffield United, or get thrashed by an Arsenal. That's not my opinion. That's what I think they're at. And having sort of batted away pressure from supporters and maybe parts of the media at some points to sack Pochettino after the Wolves defeat, after the Brentford draw when the fans started chanting against him, or after the thrashing at Arsenal, having resisted that pressure to sack him, I think they thought that were he in August to September to, have a 3-game bad run or a 2-game bad run, they were therefore then going to find it very difficult to resist the pressure again, and therefore better to make the change now. And as I said, there was no real appetite from the club or Pochettino to go into a final season with absolutely no guarantee of what was to come after that.
We also saw, just speaking from the club side, it seems like some of their concerns were not only around the results and like, projecting into the future on results like you just said, but with some of the training methodology and some of the injury issues that came from that training methodology. Can you speak any more on that and what we're led to believe
Yeah,
as
look, what I
a
was told certainly on the fitness, I probably should clear what my information is on the fitness. Everyone gets different information. My information on the fitness is the pressure is on the club as a whole. Everybody at that club is under immense pressure to fix the fitness issues. I haven't got wind that was something that was directed solely at Pochettino and his
okay.
staff.
Yeah,
I'm told that the fitness issues are club wide, that everybody is under the cosh and under pressure on that, and there's an acceptance that is a club problem and not a Pochettino problem. That's my information. I know some of the reports have written differently. My information is that is viewed as a club problem and not a
fair
Pochettino
enough.
problem. Sorry, what was the rest of it?
Just the broader training methodology and how it was maybe not going to help the team get to the results that they.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, clearly, philosophical differences was the phrase that was used to me, and I think that embodies everything within it, and will embody tactics and preparation and stuff like that. And I think there are some philosophical differences in terms of how the club structure would like to see the team play, and what was happening, and maybe how the coaching staff viewed it. Clearly, there were differences there. Otherwise, Pochettino would still be manager. So, it's nonsense to suggest there aren't differences. I mean, I don't think it was viewed positively that even in the second half of the season, there was an element of chaos about the matches. If you remember the Man United game, one of the most chaotic matches I've ever seen. Obviously, great celebrations at the end, but I think it was viewed in certain areas of the club that wasn't great. That's not really what they're after. Pochettino would quite rightly point to the fact that is bound to happen with a new squad of players, many of whom are
Yeah,
young, and that you are going to get chaos on the pitch. That's part of the development. That's just part of where they are. And obviously with the injuries, that's part of what that is. But that's where the differences lie. That's where these philosophical differences lie in whether you think that it was a symptom of where the club were, or whether you think it's a symptom of the manager and the coach's approach.
so if I'm reading between the lines, and I like to think I can do that, does this sporting structure think that any manager that they hire is not going to go through periods of chaos by their own design of the way the club is being built? Like, is that like the the core expectation is that whoever comes in should make a Michelin star meal with the ingredients that they have put in your cupboard. Like, 'cause it seems like that would be counterintuitive to the as you guys say across the pond, prime Barclays of the league. You know, the unpredictable chaos. Any team could get a result at any given point. Like, City have been beaten, as great as they are, by Wolves this year out of
Yeah,
nowhere, right?
yeah.
Like, is that what I'm reading here?
I yeah, I think more performance than the odd result. I don't think it's talking about everybody has a bad result and a bad thing. I think it's more within performance, even within defeats. Um, but look, what I would say on that is I do think that whoever comes in is going to immediately come in not under pressure from above, but under pressure from the environment around Chelsea now, because Pochettino finished sixth, so you've immediately got to finish better than sixth, which puts pressure on you. I know Chelsea expect to finish better than sixth, but that ain't easy. You've got to now next season juggle a European campaign of some sort, which we know will be a Thursday Sunday campaign, which is more difficult than the Tuesday Saturday campaign. And a lot of these players haven't. Well, not a lot, but some of these players haven't had to do that before. And you've got to do it with a certain style, because the club have made that clear from their brief of the manager. They want controlled football. They don't want to be conceding loads of goals. They don't want to really be winning games 4-3 and 5-2. They clearly want an element of control and possession. That's not easy. That is not an easy brief. So whether there's a pressure from up top or not, there's pressure from the environment, and it is a difficult job for someone who comes in. Don't get me wrong; it's a great job. I actually think it's a good squad of players. I still think it's an attractive job for everything this club's been through in the last 2 years. I still think it's an attractive job. I still think it's a great job, but I also think it's a damn difficult job.
Yeah, we'll add into the fact that they're looking for, by the nature of their own statements or their briefings that they put out, someone who would not have a ton of experience at the highest level to do this job. I mean, you're all of the stuff you just said, plus, we'll go through the list of candidates here after the next ad break, but like, you're asking potentially someone who has never coached at this level to come in and do that within that environment. Like, that seems like a mismatch there, doesn't
But
it? Like,
what I would say is football has turned on its head. I mean, Vincent Company is getting
sure.
the Bayern Munich job, the guy who's just got relegated with Burnley. Arnie Slot has got the Liverpool job. I don't think Arnie Slot's ever paid more than £7 million for a player. I know he looks like he has a pedigree, but in terms of a Liverpool manager, he really has no pedigree at all. Company has no pedigree. If, as expected, Man United make a change, they're not looking at a trophy manager. They're looking at a Potter. A Potter could go into Manchester United. Football has turned on its head. Football has turned on, and I don't fully understand it all. I work outside football, as it were, reporting on it. So I don't have all the facts, and I don't quite grasp why. But football across the board, all these big clubs that are making changes at the moment are kind of heading in a similar direction. Then none of them are going for trophy managers and people with massive CVs of winning. It's completely turned on its head, and it is difficult to understand for the likes of you and me, who have grown up and sort of learned about football the other way round. If big clubs want a manager, they go and get the big managers. It's not just not just Chelsea. This is happening in football across the board now, and it does feel weird for those of us who are used to it being the other way around.
Well, I made a joke on our emergency pod when this happened. Like, by their own criteria, if Carlo Ancelotti magically became available, he doesn't seem like he would be a top candidate for the job. He doesn't play that style. Like, their defense is a little weird at times. Wins, turns out, quite a bit, but like, not young. I wouldn't say super progressive, and I don't think defensively is like all the way there. Like, That seems crazy to me. That like if someone of that caliber and or some of the other managers that are out there were
Carlo's a good,
available, that you wouldn't go for
yeah.
the best, you know?
Carlo's a good example. I'd love to know whether they would go for Carlo, because all I would say about Carlo is I could see Carlo, because of his personality, I could see him accepting a club structure. Uh, he's
Interesting.
different to Tuchel, Jose, Conte. He will have a strong opinion, but I could see him accepting a club structure. It would be a great test. I would love, like, just as a game, for Carlo to be available, because he would be a great test of this, of how far it goes. Because I would say that you could make an argument for Carlo for the fact that I think in the right circumstances he would accept a club structure. But I mean, it is mental that this summer we'll have ended the summer with the Bayern Munich job, the Manchester United job, the Liverpool job, and the Chelsea job being available, and that people like Thomas Tuchel and Antonio Conte, for all the perceived faults, aren't even getting a real proper mention for any of them, let alone having a real chance of getting them. I mean, and they're free, they're out of work. It's like I say, football's turned on its head. It really has.
Yeah, a couple of just hard dates in the calendar here. We are now 62 days away from the first preseason game. So
Well,
get
preseason
your
starts for the non-internationals on July the 4th. I
yep.
think I wrote in a piece that I've put out today, I think they are aiming for a new appointment on or around June the 1st, is what I'm told, the end of the month. Um, they're moving fast. It might come a bit before June the 1st if they continue to move as fast as they are. They expect at some stage in the interview process it will have to slow down by natural process a little bit. But yeah, um, which would give whoever the guy is basically a month to have a tiny bit of holiday, a lot of prep time, and into that first preseason training with the non-internationals on July the 4th.
And then 86 days away from the first from the start of the new season, the first
Oh,
friendly
Jesus, don't
game.
say that to me. I'm trying to think
Yeah.
about the summer here, Nick.
No,
Jesus
no,
Christ.
none for you. None
No.
for you, none for us. It's just straight podcast the entire time. We're doing all sorts of stuff. But yeah, look, I mean, we'll talk about the impacts coming up after the ad break, and of course, the managerial candidates that we know have surfaced to this point. Thank you to the sponsors. One final ad break. We'll be right back. All right, Matt. Back to square one a little bit here, like we've been talking about. Obviously, we've talked about the criteria for the decision that was made and the criteria for the decision that will be undertaken with the new manager. Uh, just a couple of quick notes before we get into some of those things. Player reactions, I think by and large, were not super positive. I think that's fair to say.
Well, they were pretty positive towards Pochettino.
Yeah. About the decision, I mean, yes.
Well, none of them sort of commented on the decision. There were a few emojis which hinted at things, I think. But yeah,
Yeah.
there was a lot of love for Pochettino, let's say, which you can then make your own conclusions from as to whether you think that's critical of the decision, or simply expressing an emotion towards Pochettino. But yeah, there were a lot of them, weren't there? There were not many players didn't give a reaction. There was a lot of social media activity. Easier to do, obviously, when you're all on summer holiday and you don't have to go into Cobham the next day. Nice and easy to get on your social media without having to worry about any awkward conversations or awkward passages in the
Yeah.
corridor.
Yeah. Look, I think, one thing that we noted is that, you have this manager who I think by and large, a couple of instances where he was critical of the players, but by and large, like shielded them from some really tough criticism, especially when things were not going well. My guess is that internally that was incredibly well received
Yeah, they'd have
by
loved
the
that. And also,
players.
I've talked on this pod loads of times over the last year. He's a people person, Pochettino. He is a people person. I mean, Brian Pullman left last weekend, who there was a lot of tributes around. The club handled it absolutely superbly. It was a lovely few days of tributes to Brian. And
Yeah.
Pochettino was so nice to him. He was so nice, both on the Friday at his press conference and on the Sunday of the game. it was absolutely lovely to see Pochettino with Brian Pullman and his family. Pochettino broke away from his preparations for the Bournemouth game about 20 minutes before the game kicked off to come and be with Brian and his family. It was astonishing. But he's like that with staff. The staff around Cobham loved him. The staff around Stamford Bridge loved him. 99% of the players loved him. And as a person, it has been stressed to me, the ownership and the sporting directors loved him. As a person, they absolutely loved him. That's why all this mutual stuff and this stuff that people might be cynical about, I think is true. He's genuinely one of the nicest guys in football you will meet, and that has been reflected in the reaction. And you're right, he took a lot for those players. I mean, there was only maybe 2 occasions where he gave them a bit back, but he took an awful lot for those players, and they will have really appreciated. I mean, someone like Nico Jackson, who I think put out quite a lot of emotion in his thing. You know, the amount of grief Nico Jackson was getting off media, pundits, fans at some points, some of it self-inflicted. But I thought Nico Jackson was one of the players that Pochettino really did some fantastic man management and work with, and that was definitely reflected in his reaction.
Someone like Madueke too, right?
Yes, great point.
Who
Great point. He's the other
he
big point.
previously
Yeah,
had a relationship with, necessarily didn't work out at Tottenham.
yeah,
You would have thought, oh, he's never going to get a fair shake at Chelsea. Poch didn't like him before. Ended up, I think, doing okay. So,
yeah.
yeah. So a little worried about the players, the atmosphere. It's a lot of chaos for a young group.
Look, I wouldn't worry too much. I've been here before so many times with lots of football clubs, not Chelsea, and it's always tempting to think the players are going to be pissed off, the players are going to be this, the players are going to be that. Players are unbelievably good at moving on. They move on super quick. They've got to in football. You go through managers, you go through managers, you go through change, you go through change. It helps that they've got a summer. There's a natural break. Some are going to go with their international teams. Some are just going to go on holiday. They come back, they start afresh. It'll be a new man. I personally don't see a problem with the players. Players move. Players always move.
Counterpoint, not the most experienced group. I think that.
I think even with that,
really
I think even with, it doesn't mean they can manage them. Managing themselves is different to moving. I think mentally they will move on very quick. They are going to need someone to be very hands-on in man management, but not in my view, because they're pining for Pochettino, because of what your point of the age and some of the experience. But in my experience, players old and young always move on very, very fast.
The next thing I just want to quickly touch on is the impact to PSR. Obviously, we know kind of where Chelsea are roughly with PSR. Read a report that the payout for Poch's second year is somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million. That's, I think, removed from the fact that they're going to obviously have to pay his assistants as well. Any concern about that as it comes to PSR? I know $3 million sounds like a relatively low number with all the great salaries and things that are out there, but any concerns about PSR with the new manager?
Not really, because Pochettino and his staff would be contracted till the end of June, which is the end of the accountancy year. So I would assume that any payoff will come at the end of that contract. Hence, it doesn't count for this lot of PSR figures anyway. And similarly, I would assume that they can work out deals in terms of buyouts for other managers that would not fall within this account. The new manager's new contract, I think this was the case with Poch, will start on July the 1st, for instance. Even if he's appointed and announced before July the 1st, it's common practice for the contract to start on July the 1st. So it's fun to think it will cause a big PSR problem, but in reality, I don't think it will.
Let's talk about the managers and then the potential managers, and then follow up with some kind of lightning round questions at the end here as we wind down this episode. You posted right before we got on that Chelsea have narrowed their managerial search to 4 different candidates: Enzo Maresca, Kieran McKenna, Thomas Frank, and my favorite, unnamed candidate.
Unknown, not unnamed. I wish I knew. If it was unnamed, at least I could tell you off air who it was. I don't know who it is, so I can't tell you.
Double secret, definitely real candidate, Matt. That's a part of this. Obviously, these are managers with different profiles, two of them coming up from the championship, one who has had very little Premier League success throughout his tenure, although I think he's punching up with the budget that he has at Brentford, and that's Thomas Frank, unknown candidate to be named later. Um, do they fit the criteria that has been put out? Because I wouldn't necessarily call Thomas Frank's style progressive
Well,
necessarily.
Thomas Frank certainly is very used to and very comfortable working in the club structure. He probably fits the profile most from the club structure point of view. I mean, he works at a club where they have specialists for everything. One of those specialists has joined Chelsea, and hence I think there's a good link there with Bernardo Cueva, who stood on the touchline with Thomas Frank in Brentford games. So certainly the club structure he fits. I think in terms of the style of play, I think he will have to show them that that's something they believe he can evolve into with a different set of players. He plays to his team's strength. Now, what they do want, again, is someone who they believe can play to the current squad's strengths. So I think you could argue with Frank that he has shown with one squad that he can play to their strengths. Can you demonstrate to the sporting directors and owners as they take this process forward that the style of play can change whilst still playing to the squad's strengths? I think is probably the question mark around him that you're referring to. Budget wise, he has punched above his weight ridiculously until the last few years with the Luton Towns of this world coming into the Premier League. Brentford's wage bill and budget was always way below everybody else's. He has punched massively above his weight.
Yeah.
So
Record, just for those out there, record since joining Brentford in October 2018, 117 wins, 63 draws, 94 losses. Used a ton of different players during this period, but yeah, not to like put a negative shine on him. Obviously, we know how difficult he is to play because Chelsea's lost to him a fair few times at this point. But I think there is if you were looking for a big name progressive style, I'm not really sure any of these guys would have been at the top of my list. I mean, you look at Kieran McKenna, who I think is maybe the person who's being reported on the most. You have 131 matches at Ipswich, 2 promotions, phenomenal. 76 wins, 35 draws, 20 losses. And then I think Maresca's somewhere around there, just having joined Leicester City, got him up to the.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go through
so.
just to go through them. So McKenna's obviously had this wonderful 2 years of success with Ipswich, done an incredible job. I've watched Ipswich a little bit in the Championship because I quite like watching some Championship football. And this is maybe unfair on him because, again, they were punching so above their weight in the Championship. But they did not dominate the ball. They played counter-attacking. They had Kiefer Moore up front, so it's kind of a big lump of a guy up front. And they would quite often defend very well and attack with 4 players, obviously Amari Hutchinson being one, and win games with kind of 4 attacking players. So again, I would have thought that the club would need to be convinced that his playing style can evolve slightly to a different squad, because in my mind, Ipswich haven't been a possession team, certainly in the Championship. But I get that he has done a phenomenal job, and people who work with him are so glowing about his preparation work and his work with data, and I think his record of having fit and available players is exceptional, which is obviously a big thing for Chelsea. So I get why he's being looked at. He's 38 years old, which just is staggeringly young to be in this position. And then Maresca, he has a clear link to Joe Shields. They worked together at City. He won the PL2 with City with a certain Cole Palmer in the team. I think Romeo Lavia was in that team. And they really are, obviously he's a student of Pep Guardiola, and he really is the possession candidate. I mean, he takes possession to another level at Leicester, to the point where some Leicester fans complained about the amount of possession they had, because Leicester have been brought up over this successful period they had before the relegation of being this very quick counter-attacking team, which is quite exciting. and they actually got fed up with having the ball all the time because they felt it was a lot of slow football within the possession. But he is a sort of possession monster. Um, so he really, really fits that brief. He's obviously worked within a structure at City. I don't quite know how it's worked at Leicester quite so well. And like I say, Shields is the obvious link with him. But again, not managed in the Premier League like Kieran McKenna, not managed a team that has to combine a top flight season with a European season. None of those three guys have that. That would be a slight concern for me because there's a skill in that. The Thursday to Sunday rhythm is not easy, and there is a skill and a knowledge to that. So I would say they all come with their plus points. They all come with their negatives. I get why for Chelsea fans it's a difficult list to get heads round because let's face it, it's not what Chelsea fans have been used to when they've been searching for new managers. And here we are, and we will find out in the fullness of time whether the so-called unnamed fourth person ever becomes named and ever becomes part of the major conversation. We shall see, and whether that is another candidate along the same lines, or whether we find out that is a candidate who has slightly more credentials to them, shall we say?
Well, one that I think our supporters would be remiss if I didn't talk about is Ruben Amorim from Sporting Lisbon. This is a guy who has been linked to Chelsea off and on over the last couple of years. Exciting manager, has won a couple titles in the Premier Liga and has done pretty well in Europa League throughout his time at that club. Any links to him? Because I know that he's one that it seems like there's a fair amount of excitement behind that is not listed here.
So at the moment, I'm told he is not in the frame. I'm scared to say these things because I've been caught out, and I'd never say never. Ruben Amorim was considered when Potter was appointed. He was the sort of other person Chelsea did some due diligence on when they appointed Potter. He wasn't in the frame last summer when Pochettino got the job. So it feels to me that whatever due diligence they did in that Potter round of events threw up something they felt wasn't quite in line with what they wanted to do. I don't think Ruben Amorim, in terms reputationally, has had a great few months. We had him boarding a helicopter without his team and club's permission to come and supposedly talk to West Ham. That felt like a play to try and get Liverpool interested in him. There was a lot of briefing around him on Liverpool, which never came to anything. I don't think PR-wise and reputationally he's had a great few months. He had to come out and apologise to his club because he admitted that he'd got on that helicopter without their permission and without telling anybody, which again maybe speaks to a character that doesn't necessarily fit within this structure and supposed collaboration that Chelsea have. So I don't think Ruben Amorim, by the sounds of it, has done himself any favours, and I've had no sense that he's part of this process at the moment.
Okay, so let's just pretend that McKenna, Maresca, and Frank are your three vying for the job. Which one are you taking and why?
If it was me,
Yep.
good question. I would go. It's a punt because you're asking me between three names who I probably wouldn't necessarily have put on my shortlist at the start.
Same.
I'd go Maresca. I think I'd go Maresca. I think he's had what I would say on Maresca. You've got the Pep link. You've got the fact he's worked at City around big players, big stars. Kieran McKenna's worked at Manchester United, so you can argue the same with him. But he's also at Leicester. He's managed bigger personalities at Leicester. He's had Vardy at Leicester, who's a club legend, who he's left on the bench quite a lot. He's had to manage that situation. He's had more pressure on him at Leicester than McKenna has had on him at Ipswich. I think, like I say, in terms of the brief that we know that Chelsea are working towards, I do think he just fits it better. If you're talking about a possession guy, he is the possession guy. If you were talking about club structure, him and Joe Shields have already worked together, which I think gives you some some sort of hope that that would work well. So yeah, out the three, I'd probably pump on Maresca. Yourself? If I've had to do it, you have to do it. You can't say I don't
Yeah,
know.
no,
You made me
I am
do it.
not
You've got to
sure.
do it.
Oh, I know. I'm not sure that Thomas Frank is the right fit, so I'll remove him kind of straight away. I do think what McKenna's done is fascinating, and just from like a character perspective, I think he'd get on well at the club. He just seems like someone who is gonna have people behind him from day one. Um, it it's probably McKenna for me of those three. Although if I got to expand to my secret fourth candidate, like your report, then I would go with Ruben Amorim. How about that?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, but
Yeah.
it's gonna be very, very, very interesting.
What one thing that I put out, and I'm just curious on you have been around Chelsea fans enough to kind of get a beat on these things. My take after the Poch sacking was that it doesn't really matter who they bring in at this point, because I think next year is going to be incredibly difficult now. It's a ton of sea change, and it's a ton of sea change when you're potentially going to have to navigate a difficult Europa League campaign as well. And so I think there's a huge chance that whatever happens next year is not going to be phenomenal.
What I would say is
So
what I do hope they do is completely now shut out the noise, because whoever they appoint now, they're not going to be able to make an appointment that turns opinion favourably on them. They're just not, because there's a lot of criticism over the mutual departure of Pochettino. There's going to be a lot of criticism over whoever clearly the way they're heading with their candidates. There's going to be a lot of doubt and criticism over which of the candidates they end up choosing. So it is pointless for them at this stage to worry about what people think. It is absolutely pointless, because they're not going to find a scenario that gives them any sort of major boost within public opinion, I don't think, in terms of Chelsea fans and also football pundits. So I think they've got to shut out the noise, hunker down, take the shit while it's flying about, and really hope it bloody works.
well, I mean that's really the point though, right? So in one scenario, in the scenario you just listed, shut out the noise and it does work, then fair play. Like
Yeah.
you made a good call. Shut out the noise and it doesn't work, which I think of the two scenarios right now is far more likely. Then you're in a way different position, right? Because it's like you have now tinkered and tinkered and tinkered, and it hasn't necessarily gone in any sort of favorable way. My gut instinct right now on Chelsea fans is that whoever comes in, I think there'll be a fair amount of like, hooray, cool. And then I think the majority of the commentary is going to be around not the manager, maybe not even the players, but around the structure.
Yeah. They must know that, though. They must know that. I mean, well, they'll have seen it the last couple of days with the reaction to the departure of Pochettino, and they must know that's going to come again, and that narrative is going to be very hard to turn around till any point at which one of these decisions on the managers becomes a successful decision. It's impossible to escape that. That is the world they're in, and to some degree, the world they have created for themselves.
So I guess the question I have is, in this world of end of season reviews and accountability, who ultimately is accountable for whether or not this works?
What, in my opinion, or the club's opinion? I
Either,
mean, my opinion
both.
doesn't. To be quite honest with you, my opinion doesn't really matter. To be bluntly honest, in the club's opinion, if this doesn't work, that's a really good question, because they are very committed to these sporting directors. I know that they think the sporting directors are doing a lot of good work. They are very pleased with the structure that they're building, but they've got to get the head coach right. They've got, the structure's great, and I know they're very excited about Bernardo Cueva. I know they're very excited about other things, and they will definitely argue that there's not as much chaos as being made out because they are building this structure. But at some point, the most important man in all this, well, the most important men are the players, and then the most important man in all this, in terms of the structure, has to become the head coach, and it has to work at some point. Look, I don't want to advocate for who should go next if X, Y, and Z happens, because frankly,
No,
that's not my job, and
that's
I don't really want to get
no.
into that, if I'm honest with you. I'm sure you'll
Yeah.
get me onto that in a more angry moment at some point in the season when I'm pissed off with everything. So try me again on that one.
Yeah, sure. Just a couple of final questions here related to the knock-on effects of whoever is selected, right? Obviously, I think there's been a fair amount made in our world, and I'm sure in your world, about player sales and the potential for club favorites like Conor Gallagher and Trevoh Chalobah and the like to leave. Any rumblings on if those decisions have been made absent of the manager or not?
Well, all I can tell you is I've checked on both scenarios, and in terms of new contracts or things that would well, not actually. Chalobah doesn't need a new contract, but in terms of any change of direction and where things have been heading, no change at all. I mean, the expectation is still that Chelsea will get bids for Gallagher and listen to bids for Gallagher, and similarly, there will definitely be bids for Chalobah, and again, I'm pretty certain they'll be listened to. I don't think Pochettino's future or the future of the next coach, whoever it is, particularly changes either scenario.
Right. What about their play on the field, which was pretty good?
Yeah, it's a fair argument. It's a fair argument, but we are where we are with it. I don't know what to say, to be honest with you. Would I keep Conor Gallagher and Trevoh Chalobah? Yes. I end every season thinking that Trevoh Chalobah is the best defender at the club and that he should be in the England squad. I seem to come to this conclusion by the end of every single season, and yet then the following season he's never in the starting lineup, and the club have probably tried to sell him in the summer. We're in this weird revolving circle with Trevoh Chalobah, which at some point has to give one way or the other, and I would expect him to leave this summer, and I would expect Conor Gallagher to leave this summer.
Are there any other exits that you're hearing rumored beyond those two? Beyond the three that are currently out there.
Yeah, Armando Broja, Conor Gallagher, Ian Maatsen, Trevoh Chalobah. I still think Cucurella they would listen to bids for. I don't know whether they'll get bids for Cucurella. I think it's all the same. They this is what the club structure is. They have their recruitment process in house, and that's why they will argue though that's why there isn't chaos, because the recruitment structure and who they want to sign and who they want to sell isn't going to swing and change on the dismissal or incoming of whatever manager. It's going to continue to be the same. I don't see anything wildly changing. No.
Beyond Esteval Willian, who was widely reported to come to a contract agreement last week, any incomings that you have heard of to this point?
There's one that I've heard they're interested in, but I can't say it yet because I haven't even reported it in the newspaper, and I'm waiting to see. It's difficult to ask these questions while a manager situation's going on, because even though it's not meant to affect them, when you're having conversations with people, it's difficult to start throwing players in with them. So, let's talk about incoming transfers when we know who the head coach is. Even though it won't necessarily have impacted them, I think it will be easier to talk about them.
Cool. Okay. Well, that is that. A fond farewell for Mauricio Pochettino. A who the hell knows what comes next sort of vibe with the manager search, and I suppose we'll just take everything as it comes from there. But Matt, thank you for the time today. Obviously, appreciate all the reporting that you're gonna do as we head through this chaotic summer now.
Well, like I say, I'm due annual leave next week, and I'm fully intending to take it. So let's see how much reporting I continue to do. My perfect scenario would be to get through Friday, have annual leave, and come back to a new manager already in place, and everyone's delighted with it. Let's see.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way this works for sure.
Which has never
All right,
happened to me
man.
ever before, but let's see.
No, no, no. Appreciate it, Matt. Thank you very much for your time. And Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue side flying high.